Hey guys, this is John, and I'm back analyzing some more rook endings from my repertoire on Chessable called Essential Rook plus Pawn versus Rook Endings. It's a free repertoire. You can go on there and learn the positions, and I hope my video accompaniments that I'm making are also enhancing your knowledge of these typical endgames, because as you might have heard, rook endgames are the gold standard for endgame knowledge. They're the most common type of endgames in practice, and you really got to know your stuff. You don't want to have to figure this stuff out over the board. So today we're going to look at scenarios where the defending side's king and rook have been relegated to passive defense. So as we can see here, black's king and rook are on the back rank. This is usually a bad sign if you're trying to defend. Very rarely in chess do you want to go completely passive, but sometimes you have no choice. And even still, even though black is so defensively placed and really can't look for anything offensive yet, white has to prove a win. And the result of the position, whether it's a win for white or a draw, will be determined by a couple things. The first factor is which pawn we're talking about. So in this case, we have a bishop's pawn. This is on the bishop's file. And we shall see that for a bishop's pawn or a center pawn, assuming proper king position for the offensive side, this is a win. But if we're talking about a knight's pawn or a rook's pawn, it's a draw. And passive defense for black, or the side that's down the pawn, will hold. So let's explore why that is. So first of all, just to confirm that black truly is passive here, what happens if black tries to gain some activity? So if we make this position black to move, let's say black tries to bring the rook down, because you might have seen from other videos I've done and your previous endgame knowledge that you want to try to set up checks from behind oftentimes when you're defending a rook endgame, like in the Philidor position. This is not going to work because white immediately plays rook b8 checkmate. Game over. So all black can really do is move the rook side to side on the back rank, or also move the king side to side, neither of which is going to help their case very much. But still, how does white win this? Well, let's say it's white to move. At some point we need to advance this pawn, but we don't want to play it right away. If you play f7 check immediately and then king f8, the problem is your rook is stuck on the wrong side of the pawn. You'd love to play check to force the king out so you can promote your pawn, but clearly we can't do that. Black's rook is guarding it. We'd really like the rook to be over here, so that we can now play rook h8 check and skewer and win. So to bring that scenario about, what we're first going to do is deliver a check on g7. So rook g7, force either king f8 or king h8. Let's say king h8 is played. And now we have a forced win. We deliver another check, rook h7, king g8, and now f7 check is appropriate, and that will bring about the desired scenario. King f8, rook h8, skewer, king e7, pick up the rook, and win. And the same is true if, after rook g7 check, black decides to go the other way. So if black plays king f8 here, we can still play rook h7, even though it's not a check. The threat of rook h8 is going to compel black to play king g8. King e8 is going to lose for similar reasons, rook h8. So king g8, and now again we have f7 check. King here, rook h8 skewer. So it's about using your pawn at the right moment and getting your rook in a position to deliver that skewer. That's why a bishop pawn or a center pawn, if we were to have this or even this, is going to win. So basically you're swinging your rook over to the side. You can see sometimes with the center pawn it's even easier. We don't even have to deliver that intermediate check. We can play the rook all the way over here, and black is just facing rook h8 with nothing to do. Game over. Now, if we look at the other scenario when it's a knight pawn or a rook pawn, we can see that passive defense holds. Because here, if white wants to get their rook on the other side of the pawn so that they can eventually play the pawn up and hopefully play rook h8, logistically it just doesn't work for white. So let's say white starts with rook g7 check once again. Black can play king h8, no reason to play king f8, and allow stuff like king h7. This is not necessary. So keep the king in the corner here, rook h7 check, king g8, and now the problem is g7 is not coming with check, unlike f7 would. And in fact, g7 loses for white. So this could be an entire reversal if white was foolish enough to follow this path, because now black plays rook a6 check. The rook finally gets a chance to become active. We force the king away, and look at that. We pick up the rook, and we're going to win the game. The pawn is dead next. So that shows why white is unable to force the defending side's king out from the g8 or the h8 squares, and why passive defense will hold a draw here. I mean, white can fiddle with this position as much as they want, deliver some more checks, whatever, come back here. But all black's going to do is just wait. Like here, black can play rook c8, for instance. And white's never going to set up that skewer that they so desire. And if ever g7 is played, we can check from the side. And the king is going to be forced away. This is an easy draw now. Now we have a Philidor defense type position. Black can just wait with the rook on the 6th rank because now the white king can no longer help the pawn ever. And same thing for the rook pawn, if we just look at that scenario too. So let's say the pawn's on h6, and white wants to play a check here, check here. In this case, it's even harder because the pawn is blocked by the rook on h7. And once again, if white tries to engineer this advance, this can just backfire on them immediately. Again, rook a6 is winning for black. Check. The only square the king can go to that also defends the rook is king f7. Rook a7 check, king moves, take the rook, and you're not feeling too good if you're white. You just blew a draw in a position that you should never ever lose, and you handed the victory to your opponent. So just to recap that, passive defense works if you're facing a knight pawn or a rook pawn. So a scenario like this will be a draw. Also, this one is a draw. But if you're facing a bishop pawn or a center pawn, and the defending side's king is up there helping, and that's a requirement for this to be a win, then you're doomed, and you don't want to have to resort to passive defense. You should have tried something else before getting to this point, because if your opponent knows the technique, it's over. Now, I mentioned the part about the superior side's king activity. That's important. So let's say we take a position like this. All I'm going to do from that first position that we looked at is change one thing, and that's the position of white's king. So with white's king on g5, if it were white to move, white would win. White would just play king g6. Black is stuck with the rook on the back rank. This is losing for all the reasons I've already described. But with black to move, what do you think black should do? And if you'd like to pause your video and figure that out, feel free to do so now. Okay, so with black to move, black can take this opportunity to activate their rook. So black can play, for instance, rook a1, creating maximum checking distance between the black rook and the white king. So black uses this small window of time where rook b8 is not leaning to checkmate due to king f7, no king on g6 for white, to activate the rook. You always got to be thinking of those defensive methods if you're the side that's standing worse in these rook endgames. So rook a1, timely activation, nothing white can do here. If king g6, check, this king has nowhere to hide. King here, check again, king here, check. Even though black's king is not technically in front of the pawn yet, it still doesn't matter. White's king has no shelter. It's going to be forced very far away from the pawn. It might even have to like zigzag all the way back, something like this. And if we get this far, black can even play rook f1, take that pawn in its sights. White's king is not in a position to help out, draw. So that could help you if your king and your rook are stuck on the back rank. If there's not that imminent threat of mate, you might have a small window of time where you can activate the rook and save yourself. Okay, so I hope this gave you some insight into how you play these positions. Again, passive defense is not your first line of defense. You want to be trying for stuff like the Philidor position, which I analyzed in my last video, cutting the enemy king off and then trying to activate your rook. But there are scenarios, like against the knight pawn and the rook pawn, where you can actually go for this right away. And it's even acceptable if the pawn is like further back. Let's say you have some position like this. Well, black can draw this in a number of ways. They can just check from the side. But if black was being very clinical about it, and maybe not clinical, but let's say black was being very stubborn about it, you can't really fault them for going for a position, if we just give black some more moves, like retreating their forces, bringing them to the back rank like this, and just waiting. And saying, like, even if you get this sort of dominating position, how are you going to win it, white? I know this is a draw because you have a rook pawn. So this is just another tool you can add to your rook endgame arsenal. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Check out that repertoire on Chessable. I'm going to be making more videos adding to this rook endgame repertoire. And let me know if you have any questions in the comments. All right, thanks, guys.